I want to go back to the issue that we raised yesterday, and this is the admission into Australia of US beef, or more of it. Already we get US beef, but we have very strict biosecurity, and any of the beef that comes to this country has to be able to be proven that it was raised solely in the United States, the mainland, not in Mexico, not in Canada. Now, President Trump has praised the Albanese government, that always worries you, decision to remove the biosecurity rules which prevented that from happening. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump said, quote, "Now we are going to sell so much to Australia because this is undeniable and irrefutable proof that US beef is the safest and best in the entire world." Well, I disagree with both of those comments. Joining me now, National Farmers Federation President David Jochinke. Good to see you again, David. We all have to trust biosecurity. So let's put Donald Trump to one side for a second. But are the farmers of Australia confident that our biosecurity regulations will stand up regardless of this change?
Well, for starters, Australian biosecurity rules are put into place to not only protect our production, our farmers, but also our consumers. And we will not allow that to either be diminished or be removed in this agreement. We have called, along with the rest of the industry, to have an inquiry to make sure that these standards are rigorous enough and that it is equivalent to what we would expect for any other produce to come into Australia. As you quite rightly said earlier, there is a pathway since 2019 for US beef that was born and raised and slaughtered in the US to come to Australia. The extension to Canada and Mexico are areas that we haven't verified ourselves. We have got our government's audited the process through the agencies, not through the actual abattoirs, which is where the contention lies here. How do we have confidence that a system is being adhered to and that those animals have a whole of life traceability, which is what the real crux of this is? When you have a disease or an issue with this in the supply chain, you have to be able to identify it from end to end, where it's been, what exposure it's had, and then for us to be able to either contain or remove it if a risk does occur. But on the flip side of that, if there is nothing to worry about, if it does meet all those criteria, it has to stand up to public scrutiny, and that can only happen if you have got a full auditable system.
What if you had a rogue producer who just said, well, they won't know. I mean, I'll get a couple of hundred head of steer out of Mexico, who's going to know? And I'll slap a label on it, export to Australia. I mean, what's the risk, do you think, of that happening?
Well, at the moment, US beef is the production of cattle within the North American sector itself is a challenging scenario for those farmers. They have got a huge demand but a low supply scenario, just as an oversight. But the real issue is when we do see beef that has gone out of a framework. When we talk about trade, we talk about free trade, we talk about the ability to have a transaction. If it goes outside a system, if that beef then enters into Australia, and there are many diseases and risks that we don't have within Australia, if that enters into our either farmland or into our supply chain, that's when we have massive concerns. So could it happen? I'm unsure of it, but if it does, we have to be able to catch it early. We have to be able to identify it. We have to be able to remove it. And those are the questions that we need to have evidence that the agreement or the supply chain can manage.
You've called for an inquiry into how the decision was made. Did the NFF get surprised by this, or were you expecting this change to come?
Look, we were briefed by government that changes were at foot, and this has been a long-term plan for a pathway to be established. It is a questionable timing of maybe a political persuasion of why we have now launched this without fully engaging industry about all of the questions that we have. But we also, as an industry, accept science. We have to be able to trust science, but as a part of that, we have to have a paper trail, and that's where our interest is, to make sure that that is appropriate, so that whatever is said in the name of science is able to be verified by the right checks and balances. Once again, understanding that whenever we have a trade agreement, it has to go both ways, and we accept that if it is safe, it should be allowed in, but we have questions around being able to identify and prove that.
David, clearly the president's never eaten a grass-fed Australian T-bone steak, has he?
Absolutely not. If any Australian would like to understand what good quality red meat is, just go to your local retailer. We have some of the world's best, and that's why we are able to export into so many different markets. And as an Australian producer, we're proud that you can go there and have a selection of not only production, but all those juicy cuts. And even right now, Steve, I think you've just made me hungry.
Yeah, I've got a whole porterhouse to roast up this weekend. David, good to catch up with you again, my friend. Thank you very much. David Jochinke there from the National Farmers Federation.